everyone. Thanks for jumping into today's Twitter Spaces. I'm Nadia Bajuelo, Community Events Manager here at Overclock Labs. I really hope everyone here is having a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be joining us from. Jumping right into it, today we're going to be talking about the latest updates on what's going on here at Akash, including the Akash Accelerator and Chia Plot Summer Sale. Greg will have an inflation update for you guys. We'll also have a Powered by Akash update, including who's the latest to have moved validator nodes and websites onto Akash, industry events across the board, and as always, AMA time with Greg. Get your questions in during today's conversation by requesting to speak. We'll then bring you up so you can ask your question. But once on stage, guys, we ask that you please remain on mute and we'll call on you when it's your turn. With that, I'd like to introduce today's special guest. Our guest today is Alani Kuye, Technical Program Manager at Overclock Labs, and here today to tell us more about the Akash Accelerator. Alani has spent the last 21 years in enterprise technology across the US and Europe with a focus on scalability and rapid deployment. He advocates through technology to drive the evolution of the internet, and his personal and professional life span across the US, Amsterdam, London, Berlin, and other parts of the world. Welcome, Alani.
Thank you.
Also, here is the man of the hour and CEO of Overclock Labs, Greg Osuri. You guys know Greg, so I'll hand it right off to him. Take it away, Greg.
Thank you, Nadia. Great to be here. So it's been quite the week. In fact, we have these kind of weeks almost. Every week we have at least one or two new apps coming onto Akash on a daily basis. We haven't done a good job of consolidating all the updates and talking about them in a weekly call. But so we changed the format a little bit. We want to keep it more ecosystem focused. Of course, we have updates from Akash engineering and product teams, but I think there's a lot happening across the ecosystem. So we want to give the ecosystem a little more limelight. For that, the big feature that we have coming up for Akash is obviously the IP address marketplace, and we started seeing a lot more use cases. I did talk about how this unlocks Solana validators, but we also had feedback from some of the Cosmos validators that this IP address marketplace enables them to have much stricter access control lists, in the sense that you could, for example, you could have a much better security controls when it comes to creating DMZs or demilitarized zones, right? So when you have like an RPC server that's front facing and you have a full node that's literally processing blocks, you can create a scenario where the public traffic only hits the RPC servers, and then your block production server is sitting behind a firewall. You can control the access, to that sealed off box pretty well if you have static IP address. So we're starting to see a lot more use cases that we haven't sat actually down and actually listed them out, but it's really good to see people trying this out, people giving us feedback early on, even before we launch a product, and that's a really good sign. That tells you how much people are anticipating this feature. So really excited about it. Quite a few projects. We launched the Chia plotting campaign. It was more like solidifying what was already there. Chia, for those of you that don't know, it's a new proof of work protocol that is proposed. It's built on proof of space time, started by Brian Cohen, who founded BitTorrent, and it's a very interesting protocol. We are very bullish and very very excited about Chia. And right now, Chia depends quite a lot on storage and a lot on fast, high-performance storage. So they've done a very good job of decoupling the actual block production from the proof generation. The proof generation is essentially called Chia plotting, which is compute intensive, and block production obviously is not that compute intensive. So since the compute intensive part is great to run on Akash, considering Akash has enormously lower cost than your current cloud, the experience was not very optimal. So we kind of like work with a lot of community members to optimize the experience for Chia plotters. And I'm not sure on the call I have Dylan here who can probably come up. Dylan, if you want to request, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more or some of the stuff that you're working on. But we have this enormous, you know, much better user experience for plotting Chia on Akash, and cost is about 10 cents compared to 40 cents on the cloud. So it's very competitive, and it's an amazing, it's very attractive to Chia Matter. So we obviously saw quite a bit of uptick, um, uptick in Chia Chia demand. I mean, the amount of AKD spent has doubled in the last 7 days. Of course, AKD has remained pretty stable from an actual price point, but the real spend has doubled. And we're seeing that with the disk as well, Chia being a disk heavy protocol. I have Dylan here from Evergreen, who's a great Chia community member. They're working on really cool stuff. And he showed me a demo of something he's working on, blew my mind. So I'll let him speak of it. Dylan, thank you for
Yeah, hey
joining us.
Greg, thanks for having me.
How are you today?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Loud
Awesome.
and clear.
Yeah, so just kind of bouncing off that, just to kind of recap at a high level, Chia is a proof of space and time protocol, and essentially what we like to say is you're freezing proof of work. So instead of solving hashes all the time, you're creating pre-solved puzzles. So a pre-solved puzzle is essentially it's called a plot file. It's a 101 gigabyte file, and that file is required to complete the block. The farmer that puts their file forward for the block gets the reward. So it's very low compute. So the device that I have is a Raspberry Pi with a hard drive full of plots. You can buy that with no extra equipment needed, plug it in, and start earning crypto. And between a hard drive and a Raspberry Pi, it's about 10 watts. So it's very, very low power. But as Greg has kind of been talking about, and the big issue, and actually the first product on Chia was what was called plotting as a service. So to create these plots, you do need a higher power computer. You can do it on your laptop, but it's going to run through the SSD, and it's probably going to take 20 hours to make a plot file. And most people, want, 10 terabytes, 18 terabytes just to kind of get their earnings going. And so from day zero on Chia mainnet, there was plotting as a service, but there's all these problems because it's hard to, buy plots, download them, host them. And so when I came across Akash and what Akash was doing with Chia, it was an absolute no-brainer because A, at Evergreen and at Chia, we're very focused on decentralized systems, but B, it didn't really make sense for any one plot provider to have to run their own infrastructure. And it's funny because actually before I started Evergreen, I was a plot provider. I was doing exactly what I'm trying to do now, which was sell plots, but I didn't have any of the infrastructure. And so I sold all these plots and I just couldn't buy the server equipment. It was like tens of thousands of dollars of server equipment. And so what we're doing now, and what was really awesome with Akash is, if we can just be very clear about it, is we sell these plotted drives. Sometimes they're pre-plotted, sometimes you download them. And instead of us having to go out and buy tens of thousands of dollars worth of servers, we can link up with some of the best plotters on Chia who are on Akash, and we can get plots for a fraction of the cost. So just again, for reference, a year ago when Chia was at its all-time high, people were selling plots for $1 to $2 to $3 a piece, and on Akash they're 10 cents. And so for us, the use case that we're doing is this is actually our supply for our business. And the demo that I had sent Greg is at this point a website that accepts ACH payment, debit card payment, basically Square payment. You pay us, you're buying plots. You're not buying AKT, you're just buying plots. And we fulfill that order by creating a deployment on Akash. And it's going really well so far because all we have to do is, essentially run a couple scripts, have a little bit of Akash in our coffers, and we can actually run this whole business now. Whereas
Dylan, you there?
at a high level,
Dylan, you there? I think you're.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the final experience that we're hoping to integrate is that all of our Raspberry Pis will have the ability to download Akash plots directly over their network. So you plug in our device, which is a Raspberry Pi, you go on the mobile app, you purchase plots, and then those plots will download directly to your device through Akash. And so in this early integration, we're using Akash as a backend, but what we really want to do quickly is allow our users to custody Akash through our app and then be able to do direct deployments themselves and even potentially host things through Akash as a provider on their device, on their Raspberry Pi with the overhead. And that would actually allow them to earn Akash. So in some sense, then they're just getting plots for free. So yeah, very excited about this integration, and would love to answer any questions that anyone has about Chia or Evergreen.
This is amazing, Dylan. Thank you so much for that detailed and very, very clear use case for Chia. And this is a classic example. Like we discussed, during a bull market when prices are high, people don't really care about cost optimized compute. But when times are difficult in a bear market, Akash is getting quite a lot of attention. And this is one of a very direct examples. A plot, when Chia was in a bull market, was selling for $2. Now it's very competitive. So a significantly cost optimized cloud like Akash, which is really the source of compute is coming from unused compute, right? So the model is really working here. And seeing Dylan speak about building a business on top of Akash, of course, they're not just writing a bunch of scripts; they're actually building an incredible product. I did see a beautiful demo, and I was blown away. And we can't wait to share the demo with the rest of the world. But just looking at the amount of stuff people are building on top of Akash that makes Akash easy for their respective communities, making the trade-offs on behalf of the user, is what we're going to continue to see. And Chia is a very organic. Chia and Akash communities are very synergetic energies, right? They are essentially Dylan is not the founder of Chia. Dylan is a community member in Chia, and we didn't have to have a official partnership with Chia. There's nothing of that sort. It's just two communities coming together, finding value in each other, and finding the synergies. And that's exactly what we want to see in Web3 and crypto, and that's what makes this special. So thank you so much, Dylan. If anyone has questions, please feel free to request, and we'll bring you up here as a speaker. Next is we have an inflation update. This is a planned update. I do remember this is in line with what we originally proposed in a white paper. The inflation target now is about 15% max. So please cast your vote how you feel like it. And the proposal is up there, proposal 21. There is also another proposal for converting CAB voting that recently passed. So CAB, for those of you that don't know, CAB is Community Awards Board, which was originally created about last year to really fund ecosystem projects, and had amazing projects that came out of it. The idea is to use some of the community funds to fund projects like Akash Lytics, both deploy as well as the dashboard. We had Praetor, which is the provider automation. There was Akash Audits. They have a new name now, which basically does auditing for Akash. We had other incredible Open Registry, which is the Docker registry for open source Docker registry. And we had incredible projects that came out of it. But CAB is also, it was very taxing on Overclock's team because it had to be fully managed. Alan here can talk more about it, but it was fully managed by Akash team. Even though you had community members that had the governance on and had finally decided who gets to fund, it was owners. So one of our community members here proposed that, Moultrie Audits proposed that the CAB funds distribution should be controlled by community more than Akash members, and we agree. It's just the the reason initially Akash team members had the Multasig control because they were $100 to $1,000 to small amounts that we felt like doing a Multasig for $100 is going to be onerous. So I think the goal is to change that. And the proposal said Tom Bayon, who maintains Akash Omnibus, Anthony Rosa, who is head for military audits, Maxime, who is our Akash Lyrics chief, Joseph Chilabi, who is he's co-founder for Chanda Station, Space Potato, who's amazing, who does a UI, amazing community member, Ethan Kravitz, who's early Akash supporter, them to be the cab members, which I think is a great way to. I think it's a great multi-sig team. It's fully controlled by community. So that proposal passed. I'm really happy about that. And let's see, we have So we have some updates on essentially the cab is one way to fund Akash projects, obviously, but we have additional funding we feel like the community needs. Considering the Akash price and we're in a bear market, community may not have all the funds. So here I have Alani to talk more about the Akash Accelerator. So we changed our model a little bit, where the Overclock Labs and the foundation will directly fund certain projects that need additional funding. So Alani, do you want to talk a little more about the accelerator?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you all for having me. Good to reconnect with the community again, and I hope I'm coming up loud and clear. Can you all hear me? Awesome. So the Akash Accelerator places emphasis on, the opportunities we have with some of the projects where the funding is going into six figures. We talk about, as Greg mentioned earlier, the Akash team provides, operating support, including marketing, business management, revenue modeling, just helping these teams attain, a solid operating velocity, because first and foremost, these teams are companies, on their own. So the accelerator process, takes, those innovative teams and puts them through a rigorous on-ramp process that takes into account all of the fundamentals of running and scaling a business while building great software. Now, being in a bear market, we understand that there's some operating challenges that come with the territory, because we understand vulnerabilities, come into play in the market we're in. Now, we see vulnerability as not a weakness. As a matter of fact, from an accelerator perspective, we see vulnerability as our most accurate measure of courage, by those who chose to build out of this bear market. And that point, as juxtaposition is, you're creating something that has never been created before, and nothing is much more vulnerable than that. And being able to adapt and help these teams grow in an accelerated manner that, places at its very core a shared sense of urgency is important. So the accelerator brings these teams in, we fund them, we provide the support, we cover the fines. As a matter of fact, Akashlytics, Praetor, Open Registry are prime examples. And for those of you who know who Praetor is, they're actually presenting at Collision in Toronto this week as we speak, if you've seen some of the activity going on Twitter. So again, taking the step forward from the cab is that growth, that evolution. You can't be a teenager forever, as they like to say. So the accelerator brings that strategic perspective to the entire ecosystem. And if you leave this meeting with one thing, okay, if you're not building on Akash, if you're not a provider, if you're not deploying tools, or if you're not buying AT tokens, get off this call, go do it now. Because there will never be another opportunity as we have today. Back to you, Greg.
Thank you so much, Alani. That was Alani is one of our amazing program managers that oversees Accelerator, oversees quite a bit of adds efficiency and helps these teams actually deliver. So he has an incredible hand in making the CAB and Accelerator very successful. Really excited to have Alani on our team. Moving on, so we have quite a bit of ecosystem news. So, Vixillo, who is a validator, just announced they're moving all the validators to Akash. It's a good win. And Alani had quite a bit of hand in helping them. They posted a tweet that I linked in my weekly update. Sperion. Sperion is amazing uh, platform as a service built on top of Akash and several other protocols. For those of you that Sperion, I don't know if there are any team members on the call. I'd love to have them up here. But Sperion announced that they've completed Akash integration and they will be launching their first beta with Akash very, very soon. I'm excited because Sperion gives you this. We talked about how Akash is not the easiest for web developers to get started because Akash, the user experience is optimized to support generic use cases, almost all use cases from nodes to mining to soon very GPUs, machine learning to all different use cases. But you have to build a platform that supports multiple use cases. You can't optimize experience for a single use case. So Sperion is trying to optimize experience for a web use case. As a JavaScript developer, you should be able to deploy apps directly from your GitHub instead of having to go build a container, ship the container to a registry and yada, yada, yada. So I love, like I said, like Akash, I don't know how many of you remember in the beginning of the year, I said Akash is really building tools for developers to build on top and make the experience better, right? And this is just a classic example, one of the examples of how that is that very design choice of ours to focus on developers manifesting into platform and services. Sperion, I'm really excited to use that platform. And next we have is Frey, Frey from Needlecast. I don't know if he's on the call, but I'd love to have you up here. For those of you that don't know Frey, he's one of the most respected validators. He's known for a strong community. They have a live show that they bring validators and talk about different things. And he announced last week that they're looking at Akash very seriously. As a good contender to replace our infrastructure. Someone like Frey giving testimony is really good for us. And he's did a live deployment for the first time on his live stream. In about 30 minutes, he's able to deploy Akash and get a node up and running. And that's an amazing feat because, something that should work, from the start is what we wanted Akash should look like. And seeing someone do that live is just an amazing testimony for our product. And they have very interesting feedback that we're working with. Of course, someone like Frey has a lot more complex requirements than normal validators. So we're working with advanced validators like Frey to make Akash absolutely the best experience to deploy nodes. And maybe we'll have Frey sometime here on one of these chats very soon. Another cool guy, Chilabi, who's our co-founder of Chandra Station. Of course, Chandra is a big Akash validator as well as a well-known validators in the space. They're deploying EVM OS nodes on Akash, and they wrote a beautiful guide on it. So for those of you that want to run EVM MOS nodes on Akash, please check out the guide. I've linked it in my weekly update. Other website moving, Waving Cosmonauts, which I believe is a NFT projects, moved their website to Akash. We have last but not least, Presearch. Presearch is a very popular application, a decentralized search engine. They have about 150 million monthly searches. It's one of the most widely used decentralized products. They've announced that they've deployed the first nodes onto Akash, and they're going to soon have one-click deployments coming to Akash. This is a special one because they initially tried to use the competition, which is Flux, and Flux was advertising in their website that Presearch being their very key users. And they said they're moving away from Flux onto Akash. And someone in their community, if you look at the post, asked why, because they said the connections were dropping, trying to run Presearch nodes on Flux. And this is where I'm very proud of design choices we made in terms of technology, right? Akash, the underlying technology comes from years of experience building hyperscale systems. Myself and my co-founder, we both are cloud native developers. We've been working on Kubernetes since 2014. And Akash is a product of 7 years of work. And we learned a lot on how not to design systems during these years. And finally, we designed a system we're very, very proud of. And this is just one example of research, which works at hyperscale, choosing Akash over the competition because of those design choices, right? Um, and so I believe building products is not about, when you compare products, it's not about what's best or what's worst, right? I have nothing against Flux. For me, it's about design choices. Building products is making those choices on behalf of our users, right? We believe we made a set of choices our users agree with us, and Flux made a set of choices that their users agree with them, right? In this case, someone like Presearch agrees with our choices more than their choices, and that's really how you determine a product is successful or not. Just blunt statements that we are better than them is not how we look at products. And when you see a lot of these statements saying that Flux is better than Akash and yada yada yada, there's just like very immature, very horrible way of describing competition. Anyway, I would have the market determine. Someone like Presearch, obviously choosing Akash over Flux is a good testament to the design choices that we made. So also, I did propose. I'm not sure how many of you were following what I was doing in terms of like, trying to get answers to certain questions Flux made. Really, it began because Masari, which is a very respectable analyst, wrote a beautiful report on Akash, and they published the report. And obviously, the Flux army started commenting, and you should look at Flux better than Akash, yada yada yada. So I started engaging with some of the streets, and that led into this long debate with the founder, who was in constant attack mode when I was trying to legitimately ask some of these questions. And they proposed we do a call, a live call, and like anything, I would prepare for the call. And I was preparing. I was using the product to discover some of the security holes that they had, massive security holes. One big hole was they were exposing environment variables to the public. Akash, we don't do that. Environment variables in Akash are private between the tenant and the provider. And the reason for that is environment variables is how you share sensitive information, like passwords. Like if you deploy a WordPress container on Akash, you put the WordPress password in the environment variable, and you pass that to you put the MySQL password in the environment variable, and you pass that to the MySQL container, to the WordPress container. But if you try to do that on Flux, it exposes the public, and I asked them if I was doing things wrong or if there's a better way to expose password to share passwords between containers, and they started attacking me when I asked simple basic questions, right? So initially they proposed that we do a live one-on-one live session, but they backed out now that they don't want to do a live session because of some silly reasons. So it's kind of like in these bear markets, when you start building products, when you start actually using products, a lot of these come out. And I'm very excited because, I think end of the day, products that work and products that customers choose should always win. And you're going to see me be a lot more active with technical nuances and actual design decisions products made over the next few months. With that, I think we can wrap up our updates. And of course, there's another industry update. We want to give a shout out to our Blue Friends DAO. If anyone here is from Blue Friends, give me a request. They minted a very cute blue frog NFT for Akash community. If you want to go check it out, please do. And happy birthday to Osmosis. Osmosis turned 1 year. I remember very well how Osmosis launched a year ago, and I was one of the first LPs, probably the first LP on Osmosis. I have a tweet somewhere, and it makes me really proud that seeing after a year, seeing through the ups and downs, Osmosis is still by far the best liquidity for Akash, and by far the best liquidity provider for the Cosmos ecosystem in general. I'm a very proud Osmosis user and a proud accumulator. I've been accumulating Osmo tokens since the day when I haven't sold a single Osmo token. I'm very bullish on Osmosis. And Osmosis, obviously, for those of you who don't know, runs on Akash. So Osmosis is one of the first DEXs that influenced a whole lot of DEXs to run the infrastructure on Akash. So happy birthday to them. And also, I've learned Thorchain has launched their mainnet. So that's very exciting. Again, we do have a initiative to run Thor nodes on Akash that we will be following up on very soon when we get some time here. So Thor is a great sort of friend to Akash. They're not yet running their infrastructure, but they will soon be running after we complete our remote signers and a few advanced requirements for running Thor nodes on Akash. So you're going to see quite a bit of Thor chain activity on Akash. With that concludes my updates so far. So let's go for user questions. So first I have here Lahi Nabi.
Lali, hi.
Hi Lahi. How do I say your
Lali.
Lahli?
Lali.
Nabi. Lali. Okay.
And that was 30 seconds on my name. I wanted to talk about Chia actually, if that's cool, or ask.
Yeah, totally.
I found it a year and a half ago maybe, and ended up buying a 14 terabyte hard drive. And so maybe now we can talk about that implementation of plots on Akash and how I don't need it, or how many plots.
Yeah. So how, can I just ask a question? How did you fill your hard drive with plots?
I think with an Amazon, with Amazon servers.
Really? And then you downloaded them?
Yes. So full disclosure, I found it, and I have a degree in sustainability and environmental ethics, and I was like, this is cool, but I'm not a dev or a validator, or I'm an artist and musician in crypto, and I love Cosmos, and here I am, and so, but yeah, so a dev friend did this, so I can answer minimally-ish. But
well, it's very similar, except just way less expensive. It's very similar to what you did on AWS, but AWS charges the compute is not that bad. It's the download that AWS just charges a crap load of money for, and Akash doesn't. They charge per second of usage. So if you're taking a long time to download, then it's going to be more expensive, but not even close. So this doesn't eliminate your need to have a hard drive. There may be, farming as a service, but there's two separate things, right? There's the plotting, which is what you did on AWS, and then there's the farming. The farming is what you earn from. So it's better to, keep your drive and have your node at home. It's just it wouldn't have been great for you to go out and buy server equipment. And in the future, instead of doing the download from AWS, you're going to want to do that from Akash. And you should definitely hit me up if you're interested. Evergreen is really made for people like you, people who are into crypto but not necessarily devs, and who want to get applications. They want to earn crypto. They want to save. They want to spend. And they want it to be sovereign and have real ownership. But it can often be very hard. And so, Greg, I know you're big on this, but it's like if all of Web3 runs on an AWS server, is it really Web3?
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, AWS can cancel Web3 with a strike of a pen, right? So one man controls it.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. Your point regarding Web2 and Web3. Part of our new validator framework, actually, we are now starting to require our validators to run all or part of their validators on Akash, even if starting with their Sentry nodes, because we have to always lead by example, and we always have to practice what we preach. So it's not enough to say we're in Web3 while running on Web2. So that migration has begun, and it will continue to happen. Back to you, Greg.
Right. So even in our own ecosystem, we noticed with Osmosis, for example, around 52% of Osmosis node runs on the classic cloud, right? Hetzner to Amazon to a bunch of others, right? And it's not the Osmosis team. Osmosis team runs on Akash, but it's just the community that are not aware of the various offerings that Akash can provide. So I think it's important for us to, making the platform easier. And now we're in the stage of like real product management, right? So we're seeing product market fit. We're seeing users using the product. We're seeing, users requesting features that are not part of the product. All that indicates a very strong product market fit, right? So I'm very excited over the next few weeks or a few months or a few years down the line, and I think in a bear market, all the noise gets canceled and Signal gets amplified, and Signal is very clear right now that Akash is going to be the future of Web3 infrastructure.